Hello students, welcome to class. In this lesson, we shall be discussing cell and its environment. So this talks about how cell they respond or they react to various conditions in their environment. So we have various ways through which cell they react to any condition within their environment. So what is now the concept of cell and its environment? This refers to the activities of the cell in a given environment or the functions of the cell in a given condition. So in every environment, there are some activities that a cell must perform. So we now want to discuss the various mechanisms upon which cell can react to its environment. So we have various mechanisms. We have diffusion, we have osmosis, we have plasmolysis, we have hemolysis, we have turgidity, and we have flaccidity. But for this lesson, we shall only be limited to diffusion and osmosis. So what is diffusion? So diffusion is said to be the movement of particles from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration until an equilibrium is reached. So that tells you that in the aspect of diffusion, it is a movement of molecules or it is a movement of particles from where it is more concentrated to where it is it is less concentrated. Now until the whole environment has the same quantity of of concentration, that is an equilibrium must be reached. So the one that has an higher concentration will now have equal concentration with the other part at the end of diffusion. That is what we refer to as diffusion. So it can also be said to be the movement of molecules from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration. So it can either be the movement of molecules, the movement of particles, or the movement of ions. So, and it is moving from a region whereby it is highly concentrated to a region of lower concentration until an equilibrium is achieved, until both the concentration gradient has reached a stable point. So that is what referred to as diffusion. So we have various examples of diffusion. Remember, we have a bottle of perfume open at one end of the room. We have a crystal of potassium permanganate, which is KMnO4, in a beaker of water. We have a stink bomb. We have gaseous exchange in alveoli and leaves. We have absorption through villi of small intestine, and we also have transpiration through stomata. So these are the various examples of diffusion. And let's take a brief look at few of these examples of diffusion. So the first one is when you press the knob of a perfume. What happens? At the point of pressing, it has a very high concentration of that scent. But after a very few period of time, which is maximum of 20 seconds or 30 seconds, you observe that the entire environment can perceive the smell, the fragrance of the perfume. That tells you that the perfume has diffused through the entire room, compared to immediately after pressing the perfume knob. It can only be perceived at the site of rest, and it is more concentrated at that end. But after a period of few seconds, what happens to the entire room? The entire room now takes the same level of what? The same level of fragrance. So that is to tell you that diffusion has taken place in what? In that experiment. Number 2 example is when you release a potassium permanganate, which is KMnO4, into a water inside a beaker. The potassium permanganate spreads around the entire beaker. Now, take for example from the image we are seeing on the screen now, we have beaker A, we have beaker B, we have C, and we have D. Looking at beaker A, inside is filled with a clean water. Now, if you take a look at that beaker A very well, you see that there is about to be a release of a drop of potassium permanganate. Now, at beaker B, the potassium permanganate has been released. Now, it is more concentrated at the point of release. Now, looking at beaker C, it is now spreading around the entire beaker. Now, at beaker D, it has been evenly spread, that you cannot deduce where the potassium permanganate was initially released. Why? Because diffusion has taken place, so it has spread around the entire beaker. So that is to tell you that an equilibrium has been reached. Diffusion has taken place, and it has now moved from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration until an equilibrium is achieved. And the third example talks about absorption of gas, which is what? Oxygen in the alveoli. Now, alveoli is said to be what? The air sac. When the lungs takes in oxygen, now it is stored in the air sac, which is what? The alveoli. And at the end of each alveoli, we have numerous of blood capillaries. That is, they help to convey blood from the heart and to receive oxygen at the alveoli. So the alveoli is now rich in oxygen. So the oxygen diffuses into the blood capillary through a process of diffusion. So when the oxygen now mixes with the blood in the blood capillary now transfers the blood that is rich in oxygen, which is called oxyhemoglobin, to the heart. And we all know the function of the heart. It is what? The pumping machine, which helps to circulate blood around the entire body system. Even in the aspect of the waste product of metabolism, which is carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide also diffuses out of the blood capillary into the alveoli, which is now released through the nostril during what? The process of breathing out. So the movement of oxygen into the blood capillary and the movement of carbon dioxide out of the blood capillary into the alveoli is accomplished by the process of diffusion. We also have in the aspect of transpiration in leaf through the stomata. The stomata is said to be a free space within the cell inside leaf. And what is transpiration? This is the loss of water in form of water vapor from the leaf surface into the atmosphere. So in every leaf, we have numerous of stomata. So this stomata, when it opens, it helps in what? It helps to release out water vapor. And what brings about the release of this transpiration or the release of this water vapor is as a result of diffusion within the leaf surface. Now I want to talk about the factors that affect the rate of diffusion. Number 1 is temperature. So in temperature, it affects the rate of diffusion. So the higher the temperature, the faster the rate of diffusion. So when the temperature is high, it increases the rate actually diffusion occurs. We also talk about the surface area. So the larger the surface area, the faster the rate of diffusion. We also have the concentration gradient. So when we have an higher gradient of concentration, it also increases the rate of diffusion. And we also have the size of particles. So the smaller the particle, the faster the rate of diffusion. And also we have the diffusion medium. Diffusion is fastest in gas. Example, when we talk about perfume, is very fast in gas. Now in liquid, it is what? It is faster. That is the spread of water. And in solid, it is what? The slowest. So these are the factors that affect the rate of diffusion. And then we talk about osmosis, which is another way through which cell react to its environment. So what is osmosis? It's a process in which solvent molecules tend to move through a semi-permeable membrane from a less concentrated to a more concentrated solution. So in this aspect, it now talks about the movement of solvent molecule. Solvent can be what? Any liquid, any fluid. So in this aspect of osmosis, only solvent is being moved, is being transferred from a region of what? Of lesser concentration to a region of higher concentration through a semi-permeable membrane. And also the significance of this osmosis is that there must be an equilibrium between the solutions to be reached. So in this aspect of osmosis, it requires a what? A semi-permeable membrane. Unlike in the aspect of osmosis that unlike the aspect of diffusion that do not require any membrane. In the aspect of osmosis, a semi-permeable membrane is required in order to move solute from a region of lower concentration onto a region of higher concentration until an equilibrium, until a stable solution is what? Is achieved. Then what are now the various examples of osmosis? We have water entering the root air. We have water moving from cell to cell in transpiration. We have water moving between our body cell and blood. We have water reabsorption in the nephron. So let's take a brief look at these various examples. We have water entering the root air. Every root has a very soft and fine ending of the root, which is called the root air. So water needs to move from the soil into the root air through the process of osmosis. And the second one is like the movement of water from one cell to the other cell. So when water has entered through the root air, so it now moves from the epidermis to the cortex to the endodermis and move from one cell inside the root to another cell before it is now being transported up to the plant. So, and this is done by the process of osmosis. And also we have when the reabsorption of water into the blood. Now when we take in water, the water we take in mix with the blood through the process of osmosis. So there is movement of water from a region of less concentration to a region of what? Of higher concentration, to until an equilibrium is what? Is achieved through a semi-permeable membrane. Then we talk about the similarities and differences between osmosis and diffusion. So what is the similarity between osmosis and diffusion? Both of them requires that an equilibrium should be reached. So that is say that solution concentration equalized and equilibrium must be achieved both in osmosis and diffusion. But the difference between osmosis and diffusion is, number one, in osmosis, it involves solvent migrating across a semi-permeable membrane. That is, it involves a membrane, which is what? Semi-permeable membrane. But in diffusion, no membrane is required for the movement of molecules from one region to the other. And number two difference is, in osmosis, only solvent particle moves. That is, only the liquid or only the fluid particle moves. But in diffusion, both solute and solvent particle, they move. So both the solute, which can either be the salt or the sugar, and the solvent, which can either be what? Any liquid form, moves in diffusion. So those are the what? The differences between osmosis and diffusion. I hope you've learned a lot from this lesson where we talk about osmosis and diffusion. So till we see in our next class where we talk about plasmolysis, turgidity, flaccidity, hemolysis. So till then, remember, readers are leaders. Bye for now.